Most people believe their values are defined by what they say during the day. They'll tell you what matters to them: family, growth, health, purpose, freedom. They'll talk about big dreams and long-term goals with confidence. But values are not proven by words spoken when the day is structured for you. They are revealed in the hours when structure disappears. Because evening, don't lie. When the workday ends, no one is directing your actions anymore. No meetings on the calendar telling you where to be. No supervisor checking your output. No external pressure shaping your behavior. What's left is choice. And choice is where truth lives. The way you spend your evenings is not accidental. It is a direct reflection of what you prioritize when effort is required and no one is watching. Most people say they value growth, yet every evening is spent consuming instead of creating. They say they value relationships, yet they give their best energy to screens instead of people. They say they value their future, yet they sacrifice it nightly for short-term comfort, not because they are lazy, not because they don't care, but because they've never paused long enough to notice the contradiction. Here's the uncomfortable truth: your evenings are voting for the kind of life you will have. Every night, you cast a vote. One vote won't change everything, but repeated votes do. And eventually, the life you're living is simply the result of how you've been voting after work. We don't drift into meaningful lives. We drift into distraction. Meaning must be chosen, especially when you're tired. After a long day, your brain wants relief, not purpose. It wants something easy, something familiar, something that requires nothing from you. That's why the couch feels magnetic. That's why the phone pulls you in. That's why hours disappear without memory. Comfort is efficient. Growth is not. But comfort never asks where you're going. It only asks how quickly you can stop feeling uncomfortable. And that's where values are exposed. If growth truly mattered, your evenings would include it even in small ways. If connection truly mattered, your attention would follow it. If health truly mattered, your habits would reflect it. Not perfectly, not every day, but consistently enough to show intent. Values are not what you defend in conversation. They are what you protect in your schedule. The problem isn't that people don't have values. The problem is that they've never aligned their evenings with them. They live one life from 9 to 5 and a completely different one from 6 to midnight. One is structured, the other is reactive. One has goals. The other has habits formed by exhaustion. And exhaustion is powerful. It convinces you that tomorrow will be different, that you'll start fresh next week, that tonight doesn't count. But tonight always counts. Evenings are the bridge between who you were today and who you'll be tomorrow. Ignore that bridge long enough and the future you want never arrives. This isn't about turning evenings into another work shift. That misses the point. It's about intention, about deciding what this time represents. Because time after work is not leftover time. It is ownership time. During the day, much of your time belongs to others. In the evening, it belongs to you. And what you do with what belongs to you says everything about what you truly value. If you value rest, choose rest intentionally, not mindless escape that leaves you more drained. If you value learning, choose a small moment to invest in it. If you value relationships, show up fully for the people around you. If you value peace, protect your mental space instead of filling it with noise. You don't need a perfect evening routine. You need alignment. Alignment is when your actions match your beliefs. When your calendar reflects your priorities. When the person you say you want to become is supported by the choices you make when it's inconvenient. Most people wait for motivation to change their evenings, but motivation follows meaning, not the other way around. When you know why your evenings matter, discipline becomes simpler. Not easy, but simpler, because you're no longer asking, what do I feel like doing? You're asking, what kind of life am I building tonight? That question changes everything. It shifts the focus from pleasure to purpose, from habit to intention, from wasting time to investing it. And once that shift happens, even small actions feel significant. 10 minutes becomes powerful. One decision becomes meaningful. One evening becomes a step forward instead of a pause button. And over time, those evenings add up. They become confidence, they become progress, they become proof that you are who you say you are. Not because you talked about it, but because you lived it quietly, consistently after work, when no one was watching. That is where real change begins. Most people end their workday believing a dangerous lie. They believe that if they're tired, They've earned the right to shut down completely. That exhaustion gives them permission to disengage from intention. And while rest is necessary, the lie is thinking that energy simply disappears and that nothing can be done about it. Energy is not something you magically find after work. Energy is something you manage. We talk about time as if it's the problem. We say, I don't have time in the evening, but time is there. The clock doesn't shorten itself after 6 p.m. What disappears is not time, it's usable energy. And when energy drops, choice disappears with it. So the real question is not, what should I do in the evening? The real question is, why do I feel too drained to do anything that matters? The answer usually starts long before the evening arrives. Energy leaks are subtle. They don't announce themselves. They disguise themselves as normal behavior. Endless meetings with no purpose. Saying yes when you should say no. Carrying emotional weight that isn't yours. Constant notifications pulling your attention in 10 directions at once. By the time you get home, you're not tired because you worked hard. You're tired because your energy was spent carelessly. And when energy is gone, discipline feels impossible. This is why most evening plans fail. People try to impose discipline on a depleted system. They set ambitious goals for a body and mind that are already running on empty. Then they blame themselves when they don't follow through. But this isn't a character flaw. It's a design flaw. High performers don't have more willpower. They design their lives to protect energy before it's gone. They understand that evenings are not the time to fight exhaustion. They are the time to benefit from the decisions made earlier. The moment you realize that everything changes. Energy management starts with boundaries. Not dramatic ones, practical ones. Boundaries around your time, your attention, and your emotional availability. Every unnecessary yes during the day is a no you'll be forced to make to yourself at night. When you overcommit, your evening pays the price. Protecting your energy means understanding that not everything deserves the same level of effort. Some tasks need excellence. Others need completion. And some need to be declined entirely. When you treat everything as urgent, you burn out before you get home. And burnout doesn't inspire meaningful evenings. It creates survival mode. Another silent energy drain is the belief that rest and productivity are opposites. They're not. Rest is not the absence of effort. Rest is what allows effort to continue. But not all rest is equal. Mindless rest numbs you. Intentional rest restores you. Scrolling doesn't rest the mind, it fragments it. Background noise doesn't calm you, it prevents reflection. Multitasking doesn't relax you, it keeps your nervous system alert. Then we wonder why we go to bed tired but unsatisfied. Real rest requires intention. It might be movement. It might be silence. It might be connection. It might be sleep. The form matters less than the awareness behind it. When you choose rest consciously, you regain energy faster than when rest chooses you. There's also a physical side to energy that many people ignore because it feels too simple to matter. What you eat late in the day, how much water you drink, whether you move your body even briefly, these aren't health trends. They're energy decisions. Heavy choices create heavy evenings. Light doesn't mean weak. It means sustainable. And sustainability is what evenings require. One of the most powerful shifts you can make is to stop planning your evenings around what you'll do and start planning them around how you'll feel. Ask yourself, do I want to feel calm, focused, connected, recharged? When you lead with feeling, your actions align naturally. If you want calm, you'll reduce stimulation. If you want focus, you'll protect quiet. If you want connection, you'll put the phone down. If you want energy, you'll stop draining it earlier in the day. This isn't about perfection. Some days will exhaust you no matter what. That's life. But when exhaustion becomes the norm, it's no longer situational, it's systemic. And systems can be changed. Evenings become powerful when they're supported, not sabotaged. When energy is treated as a finite resource worth defending. When rest is intentional instead of accidental. When choices earlier in the day are made with the evening in mind. Because evenings are not meant to fix the damage of the day. They are meant to build on it. When you manage energy well, you don't need to force productivity. You don't need motivational speeches at night. You don't need guilt to push you forward. You simply have enough left to show up for what matters. And that is the goal, not to do more, not to push harder, but to arrive in the evening with enough of yourself still intact to invest in the life you say you want. Energy makes that possible. Without it, even the best intentions fade. With even small evenings become transformative. There is a quiet moment that happens every evening, whether we notice it or not. It's the moment right after work ends. The laptop closes, the shoes come off, the day exhales, and in that moment, most people don't choose what happens next, they default to it. Defaults are powerful. They require no thinking, no courage, no commitment. They feel safe, familiar, effortless, and that's exactly why they shape our lives more than bold decisions ever do, because your future isn't determined by the big plans you make when you're inspired. It's determined by the small rituals you repeat when you're tired. Most people think change requires intensity, a complete overhaul, a new routine, a sudden surge of discipline. But intensity is unreliable. It burns bright and fades quickly. Rituals endure because they don't depend on how you feel. A ritual is simply a decision made once and followed many times. And evenings are the most important place for rituals to live. After work, your mind is crowded. It's carrying conversations that ended hours ago, problems that weren't solved, pressure that hasn't yet released. If you don't intentionally clear that mental space, it doesn't disappear. It leaks into everything you do next. That's why the first few minutes of your evening matter more than the hours that follow. When you move straight from work into distraction, you don't rest, you avoid. And avoidance keeps the mind busy even while the body is still. That's why so many people feel restless even while sitting on the couch. The day never truly ended. A simple ritual creates closure. It might be a short walk without your phone. It might be washing your face slowly, on purpose. It might be writing down 3 thoughts from the day and letting them go. It might be changing clothes immediately to signal a shift in identity. These actions seem small, almost insignificant, but they carry meaning. They tell your brain that chapter is over. A new one begins now. Without that signal, your evening doesn't start, it just continues the day. In a different room, rituals don't exist to add more to your schedule. They exist to reduce friction, to make the right next step easier, to create space between stimulus and response. And in that space, choice lives. When evenings lack rituals, they become reactive. One thing leads to another. One scroll turns into an hour. One episode turns into 3. Time doesn't feel wasted in the moment. It disappears quietly. Then guilt arrives later, when it's too late to do anything about it. Rituals interrupt that drift. They don't demand effort. They demand consistency. The most effective evening rituals are not ambitious. They are obvious. They are so simple they almost feel unnecessary. And that's why they work. Complex systems collapse under stress. Simple rituals survive it. The goal of an evening ritual is not productivity. It's presence. It's about arriving in your own life instead of floating through it. Once presence is established, intention becomes possible. From there, one small promise can be honored. One meaningful action can be taken. One conversation can be had without distraction. One moment, tea can be invested instead of consumed. Rituals also protect you from decision fatigue. After a full day of choices, asking yourself what to do next feels heavy. Rituals remove that burden. They eliminate the need to decide. Because the decision has already been made. You don't debate whether to brush your teeth at night. You just do it. Not because it's exciting, but because it's who you are. That's the power of ritual. It turns behavior into identity. When you see yourself as someone who begins the evening intentionally, you don't need motivation. You simply act in alignment with who you believe you are. And identity is far more powerful than discipline. Many people try to change their evenings by adding more goals, more tasks, more pressure. But pressure doesn't create consistency. Meaning does. A ritual is meaningful because it's personal. It reflects what you value. For one person, it might be silence. For another, movement. For another, connection. There is no universal formula, only alignment. The mistake is copying someone else's routine instead of designing your own. Your ritual must fit your life, not impress others, and it must be protected. Because the world will try to interrupt it. Notifications will compete for it. Other people's needs will press against it. Convenience will whisper that skipping once doesn't matter. But rituals lose power when they're optional. You don't need many. You need one you are. Over time, that ritual becomes an anchor. No, No matter how chaotic the day was, the evening begins the same way. And that consistency creates calm. Calm creates clarity. And clarity makes space for growth. Eventually, you stop feeling like evenings are slipping away from you. You stop feeling rushed, even when time is limited. Because you're no longer reacting, you're leading yourself. And that's what rituals do. They return control, not through force, not through intensity, but through quiet, repeated intention. When you stop relying on motivation and start relying on ritual, evenings stop being something you survive. They become something you shape. There is a word we often use to justify how we spend our evenings. We call it rest. We say, I need to rest. And what we really mean is, I want to escape how I feel. The problem is not the desire for rest. The problem is that we've blurred the line between rest and avoidance. And in doing so, we've convinced ourselves that the very thing draining us is the thing restoring us. True rest has a result. You feel clearer, lighter, more present. Escape has a residue. You feel dull, scattered, slightly disappointed, even if you can't explain why. Yet escape is seductive. It asks nothing from you. It requires no courage. It allows you to disappear without going anywhere. And in a world that constantly demands performance, disappearing can feel like relief. But relief is not renewal. Most people don't waste their evenings because they don't care about their future. They waste them because they're overwhelmed by their present. So they reach for anything that quiets the noise. Screens do that well. Endless content does that efficiently. Distraction does that instantly. The cost is subtle. You don't feel it in the moment. You feel it later in the lack of momentum, the absence of fulfillment, the growing sense that life is happening somewhere else. Escape feels like rest because it numbs the mind. But numbness is not peace. Peace comes from resolution, not avoidance. Real rest often requires more intention than work. It asks you to be honest about what you actually need. Sometimes that's sleep. Sometimes it's movement. Sometimes it's silence. Sometimes it's conversation. But it's rarely more noise. The reason escape wins so often is because it's available on demand. One tap and you're gone. No effort. No preparation. No discomfort. And because it's socially acceptable, we don't question it. Everyone does it. It looks normal. But normal isn't neutral. Normal produces results. And if you don't like the results, it's worth questioning the normal. When evenings are dominated by escape, days start to feel heavier. Mornings feel rushed. Motivation feels forced. Not because you're lazy, but because you never truly recovered. Rest that restores requires presence. And presence can feel uncomfortable at first. Silence can be loud. Stillness can surface thoughts you've been avoiding. And that's exactly why it works. Avoidance keeps problems suspended. Deep presence allows them to settle. This doesn't mean every evening should be deep or serious. Joy can be restorative. Laughter can be healing. Entertainment can be healthy. The difference is intention. When you choose entertainment, it nourishes you. When entertainment chooses you, it consumes you. Intentional rest has boundaries. It has a beginning and an end. It fits into your life instead of taking it over. Escape, on the other hand, is endless. There is always another episode, another scroll, another distraction. And because there is no stopping point, there is no satisfaction. The human brain is not designed for infinite consumption. It's designed for completion. That's why finishing a meaningful task feels good, while endless consumption feels hollow. One of the most powerful shifts you can make in the evening is to ask a simple question before you rest. What kind of tired am I? There is physical tired. There is mental tired. There is emotional tired. Each requires a different response. Physical tired might need sleep or gentle movement. Mental tired might need silence or simplicity. Emotional tired might need connection or expression. Escape treats all tiredness the same. Real rest does not. When you match the rest to the fatigue, recovery happens faster. Even short periods become effective. 10 intentional minutes can restore more than 2 hours of mindless distraction. This is why people who seem to have productive evenings are not necessarily doing more. They're resting better. They end their evenings with something left in the tank, not because they pushed harder, but because they stopped numbing themselves. And there's another layer to this. Escape trains your brain to avoid discomfort over time. Even small challenges feel heavier because your tolerance for effort shrinks. Intentional rest does the opposite. It restores your capacity to engage. The goal of the evening is not to avoid life. It's to recover enough to return to it stronger. When you stop confusing escape with rest, guilt begins to disappear. You no longer need to justify your evenings because they actually serve you. You go to bed with a sense of closure instead of regret, calm instead of restlessness, and slowly something shifts. You stop feeling like time is slipping away. You stop waking up already tired. You stop needing extreme motivation to start again. Because you are no longer surviving your evenings. You are using them to restore your ability to live with intention. That is what real rest does. It doesn't steal time from your future. It prepares you for it. Most people overestimate what they can do in a single evening and underestimate what one small promise can do over time. They sit down after work with the quiet pressure to make tonight count, to be productive, to improve themselves, to fix everything they didn't do during the day. And that pressure, while well-intentioned, often becomes the reason nothing meaningful happens at all. Because when the goal feels too big, the mind looks for relief. And relief rarely looks like progress. The irony is that real progress doesn't come from grand evening plans. It comes from one small commitment that you keep, especially on the days you don't feel like it. One promise, one action, one moment of integrity with yourself. That's how trust is built. We often talk about self-confidence, as if it appears suddenly, as if one day you wake up believing in yourself. But confidence is not a feeling. It's a memory. It's the accumulation of evidence that you do what you say you will do. And evenings are where that evidence is either built or broken. Every time you promise yourself something and don't follow through, a small fracture forms. You might not notice it immediately, but it shows up later as hesitation, as doubt, as the quiet voice that says, why try? You won't stick to it anyway. That voice isn't negative. It's protective. It's trying to prevent disappointment. And the only way to quiet it is not with motivation, but with proof. Proof comes from keeping small promises. A promise so small it feels almost insignificant. 10 minutes, 1 page, 1 lesson, 1 intentional act. Small enough that excuses sound unreasonable. Small enough that exhaustion can overpower it. The size of the promise doesn't matter. The consistency does. When you keep a small promise every evening, something powerful happens. You stop negotiating with yourself. You stop relying on how you feel. You simply act because that's what you do. This is where discipline actually comes. From not force, but identity. You don't need to become a disciplined person. You need to become a person who keeps promises. Discipline is a byproduct of that identity. Many people fail to change their evenings because they chase outcomes instead of behaviors. They focus on goals, learning a new skill, getting fit, building a project, becoming more confident. Goals are inspiring, but they're distant. And distance weakens commitment. Behaviors, on the other hand, are immediate. They happen tonight. They're tangible. They are repeatable. A single evening doesn't change your life, but it does change your relationship with yourself. When you honor a small promise, you go to bed differently. There's a quiet sense of alignment, a feeling that, at least in one way, you showed up. That feeling matters. It becomes the reason tomorrow feels lighter. It becomes the reason you're more willing to try again. Momentum doesn't come from success. It comes from follow through. And follow through grows when the bar is low, enough to step over even on hard days. This isn't about lowering standards. It's about raising consistency. There's also freedom in small promises. They don't trap you. They don't demand perfection. If you miss a day, you return the next without shame. The promise remains simple, doable, human, and because it's manageable, it lasts over time. Small promises compound. 10 minutes a day becomes hours. 1 page becomes chapters. 1 conversation becomes deeper relationships. Not because you pushed harder, but because you stayed long enough for growth to happen. Most people quit too early because they mistake slow progress for no progress. But slow progress is how anything meaningful is built. Evenings are not the place to prove how much you can do. They are the place to prove who you are becoming. And who you are becoming is defined by what you do consistently, not occasionally. When you keep one small promise in the evening, you reclaim agency. You stop seeing yourself as someone at the mercy of exhaustion. You become someone who can be tired and still intentional, that shift is profound. It means your circumstances no longer control your behavior. It means progress is no longer fragile. It means your future is being shaped quietly without drama. Eventual. Why? The small promise stops feeling small. Not because it grows, but because you do. Your confidence grows. Your tolerance for effort grows. Your belief in what's possible expands. And one day you look back and realize that the life you wanted didn't arrive through a sudden breakthrough. It arrived through hundreds of ordinary evenings where you kept one small promise to yourself. That is how trust is rebuilt. That is how momentum is created. That is how evenings stop being wasted and start becoming the foundation of everything that follows. At the end of every workday, there is a moment that belongs only to you. No one is asking for results. No one is setting expectations. No one is watching. And yet, that moment carries more influence over your future than most of the hours you spend being busy, because evenings are where direction is chosen, not through big decisions, not through dramatic change, but through quiet, repeated choices. You don't waste your evenings because you lack discipline or ambition. You waste them because they were never designed with intention. They were left to default, and defaults always favor comfort over meaning. But the moment you decide that your evenings matter, everything shifts. You begin to see that energy can be protected, not just spent. That rest can restore instead of numb. That rituals can guide you when motivation disappears. That one small promise, kept consistently, is more powerful than any burst of inspiration. This is an OT, about turning life into a checklist. It's about alignment, about making sure the person you want to become is supported by the choices you make when you are tired, distracted, and free to choose anything. Evenings don't need to be perfect. They need to be honest. Honest about what you value, honest about what drains you, honest about what you're avoiding and what you're building. When you stop confusing escape with rest, you wake up clearer. When you stop relying on motivation, you become consistent. When you stop waiting for the right time, you realize the right time has been waiting for you every night after work. Your future is not created in a single breakthrough moment. It's created quietly, through the way you spend the hours no one applauds, the hours that feel small, the hours that seem unimportant. But those hours are stacking, they are shaping habits, they are shaping identity. And identity shapes destiny. So don't ask how to do more in the evening. Ask how to do what matters. Choose one intentional act. Protect your energy. Create a simple ritual. Rest with purpose. Keep one promise to yourself. Do that consistently. And evenings stop feeling like wasted time. They start feeling like progress. Not loud progress, not impressive progress, but real progress. And one day, you'll look back and realize the life you're proud of wasn't built in the spotlight. It was built after work, in ordinary evenings, when you chose purpose over comfort and quietly changed everything